for dialing in. As you dial in, please feel free to use the chat. WBC warmly welcomes you to the CEO Roundtable on Gender Equity and Leadership. It will be an extraordinary learning experience. On behalf of Robert Reiss and Becky Shambaugh and Johanna Zeilstra, we welcome everyone. Good morning. We're going to give yourselves one more minute before we officially start the session. WBC warmly welcomes you. And if you would feel free to use the chat, announce yourself in chat, that would be terrific. We are recording this and it will be out on social media. There will also be a Forbes article. So please get back in touch. We will officially start in about 45 seconds. Good morning. Terrific to see some of the chats coming through as we gain more and more people that are joining the call. WBC warmly welcomes you. We're all about leadership and championship, and gosh knows that's what you will hear today. Well, officially, welcome to the Women Business Collaborative CEO Roundtable on Gender Equity and Leadership and DEI. We just want to stop at the Thanksgiving time and express gratitude. And gratitude to leadership, to servant leadership. And as we know, leaders build other leaders, not followers. So you will hear from these CEOs today and our WBC family that we're all about building other leaders, driving with bold action, and never stopping until we change data, until we build profiles of leaders, and as we build thought leadership that we call action leadership. So with that, all of our gratitude and thanks. We do have 61 women partner organizations, all collaborating for equal position pay and power against our 9 action initiatives. And with those initiatives, as you know, we clear the data, we tell the stories, and we ask you to get engaged. There are now 300 that have joined our advisory council as champions. That is just incredible, with 2 chairs and 20 co-chairs as we look at action. Very specifically is we are focusing on tech leaders. So it's great that you have 2 tech CEOs on today from both Mitel and Autodesk, is because just like we looked at women CEOs and do a report with Catalyst C200 and Ascend, we will produce a major report in October on the status of women CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, artificial intelligence, cyber, and clearly data management, of which all CEOs use for judgment. The other big announcement you saw during our summit, that we are working to produce a film on corporate purpose called Why is Mona Lisa Smiling? And we will be doing that by late spring. But most importantly, we've taken that to develop our own WBC companies of purpose. and really looking at those companies, naming chief purpose officers, and as Zeilstra will say, integrating the numbers on the board, the numbers in the executive suite, what their numbers look like across the board with DE&I, also what the brand stands for, what their supplier diversity looks like, and how ESG equates to gender and diversity. And you will hear that as total exemplary from all three companies. And a special shout out to Jodie McLean, who has built a multi-billion-dollar company, all based on purpose, as you will hear today. So with that, we also just want to tell you one more piece of good news. You know, we track boards, and there are over 247 boards that have hit over 35% women. But what we're seeing today is averaging 42% women joining public boards, with a third of those being women of color, because WBC works with Equilar to name every company. And with that, when I was talking to my friend Mary McDowell, CEO, who's speaking today, she was so proud to talk about her board leadership with Andrew and Autodesk, and that they too had reached parity. So with that, it is a real pleasure to turn that over and announce that Becky, Robert, and Jose are board members of WBC. So with that, Becky Shambaugh.
Jodie, thank you so much. I think you set, as always, a wonderful and inspiring foundation for today, and all the many great things that WBC is really doing to move from conversation to action when it comes to equity for women and equity for all. So I wanted to just kick it off and give you a quick agenda. I am joined here, as Edie said, by my dear colleagues who are all board of directors for WBC. Robert Reiss, who is the CEO founder of the CEO Forum, and of course, Jose Zeilstra, who is also board of directors for WBC and also the CEO of Gender Fair. Today, we're going to have an agenda that takes the opportunity just to, Edie's done a great kind of pre-introduction with everyone, just some stellar executives, a couple from who are very innovative technology companies, and then of course Jodie, who represents the retail real estate industry. So a broad spectrum of diversity, but all channeled into a passion and intention around building more of that inclusive community around us, but also really helping to achieve at all levels that equity for all, particularly for gender. And so let me just do a quick intro. Mary McDowell, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate your presence here today. What's interesting, Mary has had a long track record, as we were talking, in the wireless, mobile community. In fact, she was noted as one of the top 10 women in the wireless community back way when there weren't many women at all, but still very active and being a role model for so many women. Mary, as we all know, is the chair of directors for Mitel, which is a global business communications provider. She is also, as Edie said, is on the board of Autodesk. Congratulations for that, for the gender parity, and also on Infomapink. Andrew Agnostic is also president and CEO of board of directors of Autodesk, a very innovative software company serving the construction and engineering industry. I think what is interesting, a little personal side about, Andrew, I did a little research on you, and you have a strong background in engineering, but
Robert, can you please take over?
Robert, can you pick up?
Yes, so we're just doing the introductions, and I think it's ironic that we have two top technical companies, and here we have technical challenges, but I think this makes us all feel at home that we have these technical challenges. And Becky was doing a great job introducing everyone. So why don't we start off with Mary McDowell? And here's a question. As you look at gender parity, so much is driven by the dollar. As we know, people are motivated by it. And what is the role, and really talk in depth, of the compensation committee on a board at driving something as important as gender parity, diversity, and leadership?
Yeah, you know, the role of the board is obviously to work in partnership with the management team to help guide a company and maximize its business success. You know, the adage about boards is that you can stick your nose in, but not your fingers. So you're really there to support. And, you know, one of the key tools in a board member's toolkit is, you know, asking questions, looking for data. How is the company doing in terms of diversity hiring? How is the company doing in terms of pay practices? How do promotions look like? How are things being rewarded? Taking accountability for the board composition itself. Does the board composition reflect the world that we would like to live in? Are we bringing the right executives to the board to share what's going on in their businesses and engaging with them? Are we engaging with the CEO on hiring of executives so that the management team of the company reflects a diverse set of perspectives? Picking the right company with which to engage is super critical here. You can water a stone all you want, but it won't grow anything. There has to be a seed. And certainly I am fortunate that there's more than a seed. There is a flourishing oak tree with Andrew in terms of the practices that he's been leading at Autodesk. And so we have a company that has a female CFO, a female CTO, a lot of work to sort of bring women's voices and engagement to the company, which I think is more critical than ever for a global company. So it's tools, it's engagement, and it's obviously finding the right business partner. You know, those are the tricks of the trade from a board perspective.
Now, my sense is a lot of people listening in may want to become board members. Maybe they aren't. And it's funny. I mean, I've been on boards for, I don't know, decades, but it's the first time I ever heard that you could put your nose in, but not your fingers. But it's so true. Could you explain to everyone what it's like being on a board and how your role is in strategy? And this is especially if women want to become board members. And now, as we know, finally, we're moving forward, you know, up to 42% of people currently go.
Yeah, you know, I think the best boards are the ones that do bring the right expertise to the table because it is a partnership. So the management team is accountable for the strategy and the direction of the company. But if they have the right board, they can tap into the expertise of others to calibrate. You know, do we have the right priorities? Do you think we've understood the market correctly? Are there things that you think we're missing, and sort of, you know, pressure test some of their assumptions and their plans? And, you know, we've all learned to be agile, particularly in this environment. You know, one of my other boards, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were doing weekly calls just because the impact of the shutdown was so severe on the business. And, you know, we were happy to provide that level of engagement with management as they navigated through. So you can't really predict, but you're there to be a resource and, you know, hopefully a source of value as the company navigates, you know, the very real challenges of business.
Well, thanks. I see Becky is back from the technical challenges. Handing it over to you. Becky?
Or maybe not.
Maybe she's not. So what I would find is, how do you find, Mary, that women really find their voice?
You know, I think it's a great question. You know, when I think about work, I'm a product person. I'm a veteran of the tech community. So I think of myself, and I think others thinking of it in a product frame. You know, your intellect, your energy, your expertise, that's a product. So what's your value proposition? Where are you going to be unique? And the first thing you think about with a product is, what is the target market? And I think finding the right environment has to be step one if you're going to thrive, either the right company or the right manager. And unfortunately, tech has gotten a little broy. And they don't come with neon signs that say, hey, the last 3 major decisions were made, in the 19th hole after a round of golf, or God forbid, in a strip club, right? It's never that blatant. So how do you unpack? How are decisions made? What happens when things go wrong? What is celebrated when things go right? What are the heroes? And if the heroes are people that, worked 36 hours without sleep to get something done, and that's what you want to do, awesome. If that's not what you want to do, take that under advisement and choose elsewhere. But I think sort of understanding that environment is absolutely critical. And then I think you want to think about, how do you position yourself? What are the heroes of the company, and does your personal value proposition align with that? And specifically, how do you show how you're contributing to the business? I think that's a little bit easier to do if you're a product maker or if you're a salesperson. But so often women, and particularly women leaders, are in the so-called support function, which I think is a little bit of a pejorative description. They're in HR, they're in finance, they're in marketing, which is great. It's been a route to the top. And so I think the challenge and the opportunity for those women leaders is obviously to perform your function incredibly well, but as much as possible, don't stay in your functional swim lane. Particularly, finance and HR, you are in all of the meetings. You see the business happening from the position of your functional expertise. Engage in the business and help guide the business and take that broader lens, and don't wait for that invitation. Division heads, other people, have a pejorative lens on the thing that they're doing. You're a neutral entity that have the needs of the enterprise at heart. And I think that creates a great opportunity and a great platform for someone to engage very fulsomely.
Well, thank you very much. And I think we're going to move over to Dr. Andrew Anagnost, and he is the CEO of Autodesk, and also obviously very involved with Mary on the board there. So I want to start off, I'm going to ask one question, and then I'm going to hand over to Becky, just to make sure that our technology is totally seamless right now.
I think I'm good now, Robert. Thanks. Sorry for that interruption.
Okay. All yours, Becky.
Oh, well, great. Well, Andrew, thank you for joining. And, you remind me of just that visionary early on when you were a young kid, really aspiring to do some of the things that you're doing now. I guess when you think about your vision starting up, and I understand that, you worked with NASA in your postdoctorate as a fellow. Was that something that you had as a vision, early on when you were younger? And I think of just aspiring and achieving our dreams, right? Was that something you had always thought about doing? I think you're on mute, Andrew. Oh, still trying to hear you.
Lorena, I think Andrew is on mute.
Unmute. There we go. They had to unmute.
There we go.
Sorry about that, Becky. Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. That was something I was very passionate about from a young child. Wanted to get involved with space exploration. I think it's important to know why. When you always ask somebody why they're passionate about something, you gotta know why. I was very passionate about the whole concept of colonization of space because, I believe it's actually a super beneficial thing for humanity. And it's not about getting to Mars or space tourism. It's about mining asteroids and microgravity production. So we can talk about that at a different forum, but yes, It's always been something I was very passionate about.
Well, so that's a big vision. So can you translate that into, which I know that you've been very intentional about, what is your vision for the world of gender parity? What, from a perspective from Autodesk and for all of us in the workplace?
When you hear somebody's vision, you always have to hear why they have it. And I think this is super important because, why somebody believes something helps you understand whether or not it's worth listening to. All right. And, for me personally, I think we're living in very dangerous times. All right. We are trapped between false archetypes and stereotypes between right and left, masculine and feminine, black, white, rich, poor. And if you haven't noticed, it's tearing the fabric of society apart. If you don't believe that, or if you think everything's okay right now, you may have fallen off the clue train and you might want to buy a new ticket, all right, and get back on. But I think if we look forward, all right, and we start paying attention to what's important in the world, the most prosperous, peaceful, and innovative societies, countries, cultures, companies in the world are going to be the ones that successfully integrate diverse perspectives across gender, across ethnicity, across ideology, and all of these things. The people that bring these things together, they're going to save us, all right, because we're not in a good place. All right, so the whole conversation we're having right now is a part of the solution. It's part of moving forward here. So when I look at these things, you know, I don't necessarily look at it through the lens of parity or the discussion we're having right now. When I look 10 years out, I hope we're not talking about parity and these things. What I hope we're talking about is this idea that anybody can be what they want to be within a structure. And it's based on their curiosity, their creativity, their ability to execute, and not any of these archetypes or stereotypes. You know, for instance, I'm in serious danger of having my staff lean 70-30 female male next year. I want to live in a world where that's not viewed as a bad thing or a good thing, all right? Because, you know, 5 years, it could lean the other way, 70 male, 30. The more important point is it should be able to fluidly move based on the talents and capabilities of the individuals that you're working with, not based on any kinds of held beliefs about this person's going to be good at this because they're this or that. So that's my vision in terms of my personal feelings here at Autodesk. You know, it's really just all about changing mindsets and people's points of view about where the talent comes from. Look, women have arrived. Let's just be super clear here. There isn't a pipeline problem here, right? There is not a pipeline problem with female candidates. Even in technology, there is not a pipeline problem. It is purely a problem of understanding, selecting, and enabling talent to thrive and move up within organizations right now.
I love what you said there. I love your vision. And I think where we need to go, where we should be is move beyond the labeling, right? Move beyond the labeling to tapping into the best of everyone, right? And creating that space for them to really thrive. And that's kind of what this is all about. And that's how we all will thrive. If not, right, it'll continue to be rough headwinds and challenges. So yes. I'm going to turn it over now to Robert for the next question for Andrew. Thank you.
So Andrew, a great vision and clarity on that. And you obviously, as a former rocket scientist, are a real thinker, and you've an engineering mindset. So now you've engineered Autodesk to pretty much triple the valuation and stock price. So here's a question. How do you, in an analogous way, how do you deconstruct through an engineering mindset the culture of a company so everything is more aligned with your vision that has all the gender parity and that the best qualified people always rise to the top?
Yeah, by the way, nobody calls me doctor any. It's always fun. And calling me a rocket scientist is an insult to real rocket scientists. So we just got to be super clear on that. Yeah. Look, so you changing anything, especially, you know, I'm in technology, so we love to talk about disruption, right? And you have to disrupt the norms and the flows and the processes within the organization to try to drive a certain kind of change within the company. All right. And I look at it through that lens of how do you do that? And if you look at it, first you have to understand what's working and what's not working in your organization. So you have to apply the scholarship, like you talked about, Robert. You have to understand the data. All right. Where are you being successful and why? Where are you not being successful? Where are there real challenges? Who's being abused by the system? Who's not being abused by the system? Who thinks they're being abused by the system but not being abused by the system? Who is actually being abused by the system but isn't even noticing it? All right. You have to understand that stuff, and you have to dig into the data, because every organization, every culture is unique. in that respect. So as a scientist, scholarship is the first vector of understanding what's going on in the organization so you know where to focus. But then you have to start challenging some of the norms and some of the processes, all right? And there's certain things in the norms and processes that make things move faster or slower with regards to how you achieve some of these challenges and overcome them. There's little things, all right? And I'll talk about something that we did inside the company that requires, a lot of courage sometimes. Just redefining how decisions are made in the company. This is really simple, okay? How do you get more voices in the decision-making process? So one of the things we did inside the company, and by the way, my metric of how well this is working is some of my senior female executives, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is we rolled out in the company a structured way of making decisions. And we actually said that somebody has to be anointed the decision maker. You can't just kind of pretend that you're all making the decision. Someone has to be the decision maker. And then what you have to do is you have to seek advice and feedback on your decision. And you have to systematically seek it from everyone in the room or every one of the stakeholders. And there's an amazing thing that happens when you do that. When you do that, people who were quiet before or were being talked over before suddenly have a voice in the room, because you pause and say, Amy, do you have any questions related to this particular proposal? You hear their questions. Amy, do you have any feedback with regards to this proposal? Well, I think it's working this way or that way. And amazingly, surprisingly, all of a sudden, people who may not have been able to get their voice heard or been engaged in conversation are suddenly contributing some of the best ideas in the room. All right. So these kinds of things that break the norms and challenge the norms, they feel like they're slowing you down and they're getting in the way. And in some ways they are. Diversity is not the way to go fast. You want to go fast? Create a homogeneous culture that's focused on one thing and you will go fast. Startups are not smarter than the rest of us. They're just maniacally focused on one thing. All right. That's why they go fast. But if you want to create a diverse and inclusive culture, you're going to go slower. All right. And you're going to have to create these processes and break these norms. Same thing with the interview processes. We created the panels of, we're always making sure that our panels are diverse. We don't always hire the woman or the diverse candidate, but the panels are always diverse. And the hiring managers are starting to build the muscle of always making sure that they have these diverse panels. So you have to have these paradigm breaking things that go into the company, and you have to push them and you have to wash, rinse, repeat on them because they don't stick and they take time. But if you don't do any of those things, you don't make progress.
Thank you, Andrew. Fascinating framework of decision-making and how that systemically impacts practically everything. Back to you, Becky.
Real practical things that we can do right in front of us, right? I want to move on to Jodie. Hey, Jodie, welcome.
Thank you.
Just an incredible background in the retail real estate industry. I know that's part of your passion, but you have so many more we want to talk about today. So thank you for all that you're doing. We have a lot of viewers here today, men and women, and particularly women who are aspiring women leaders, may work in the retail real estate industry. But given your journey, your path, right? What are some of the notable pieces of advice that you could give other women, no matter where they are, even if it's not aspiring to be a CEO, but just to ascend and reach their goals? What advice do you have for them for navigating, particularly this new terrain?
I start with a little bit, I think this is what Mary was also saying, but I start with giving the advice of say yes. And I know as women, we say yes to too many things, but I think at work, we're too reluctant to take the opportunity when we should. I watch in our workforce all the time, and I whisper in young women's ears all the time, go for it. Because our male counterparts who are wonderful feel the confidence to go forward when they're about 65% ready. And it's not for any other reason than they're wonderfully aggressive. And I watch women sit back till they're about 110% ready to take that risk. And I think that's a shame. So I always say yes. And I could not agree with Mary more that I think I refer to it as P&L responsibility, women tend to, and over stereotyping here, stay away from taking on P&L responsibilities, which I think if you're going to ascend to the C-suite, you have to be willing to take on that responsibility. I have a little saying for myself, which is take the shot. When I was 17, 18 years old, I failed at something that was in some ways life altering, in other ways, maybe we all fail this way. But I was playing field hockey. I was on an undefeated team. And this was like the final game of the year. It wasn't yet the championship. And we were tied at overtime. We were tied at the end of the game, went into overtime. I was a forward. I got the ball. It was a clear takeaway. The clock was winding down. I had a certain way I always took my shots. I leaned on one leg, I followed through the other. And, I was in the wrong stride. And because I was in the wrong stride at this moment, I didn't take the shot and the clock ran out and we tied. And worse things in life have happened, except it lives with me all the time, that had I taken the shot, it could have gone in. It could have gone wide of goal. The goalie could have stopped it, but I'll never know because I never took the shot. And so for the young women around me, that's the first thing I say. I say, take the shot. You might be mid-stride. Go ahead and go for it. But in conjunction with that, find the right partners around you. And I think that's some of life's best advice. It's simple. It's the kind of advice you learn when you're young. But whether it's your work partners, it's your home partners, if you really want to ascend and be excellent at anything, it's going to take time. It's going to take focus. And you need the right people around you who are willing to support that work, and also those support and be honest and open with you. Because if you take on responsibility before you feel like you're fully ready, you need honesty. You need people to be willing to get in there and continuously mentor and help you grow into whatever role you've taken on. So I think this thought about partnerships and then as you continue through your career, whether it's investors, whether it's your board, because your board really does become your partners. I think picking your partners right is some of the best advice for all of us. And then I was listening and I agree with Mary, moving around the company. It's been a huge part of my own success, is really understanding every piece of the company, but also finding that time to go deep and to get the confidence and expertise was something that I needed to do. And so I think that's another thing. And remembering at that point in your career, when you're going to go deep into one thing for expertise, it means you have to let a lot of other things go. So if you're going to be really excellent at one thing, it means you might be mediocre at a few other things. And again, if you have the right partners around you, that's okay. And I think that's hard sometimes, especially for women, to accept.
Jodie, thank you for that. I think it just resonates so much with everyone here. And I think a lot of it starts with mindset, as you said. It's that story going on in our head, but then lean in, right? And then from there, really have those support. That's why relationships and that support network I think all of us have not done anything really significant alone. We've always had that support network. So thanks for that. I'm going to turn over to Robert because we want to learn more about what you're also doing for women entrepreneurs. So Robert?
Thanks. And I love that. There's a book there, Take the Shot. So
that's right.
So you have a new venture, Women Entrepreneurship Leaders, Women Entrepreneurial Leadership. Just talk about the concept there, what you're focusing on accomplishing.
Sure. It's probably 7-8 years old now. Because of the work that I do in retail and mostly in communities, so much of community is made sitting around the table, have a real interest in the restaurant industry in general. From that, I think we all know the restaurant industry is our second largest employer. About 56% of the restaurant industry is female. But when you look at the major brands and real executive positioning, it's about 7% women. But this industry at the same time, for all of its importance, also moves more people by number from economic instability to economic stability each year, and moves people through on the path to middle class. So it's a tremendously important industry. But what I also realized at this point in time was that the women in this industry reported on a 93% positive for routine sexual harassment. It was an industry that had no real insurance benefits, didn't have health benefits. There were a lot of policy issues that needed to be changed. And so from this perspective, we started a group talking about the dynamics of the industry and what could we do. And what seemed to be missing was a female voice. And in order to really have, I believe, voice in policy change, whatever policy change that is you want to see, you either have to have equity, ownership, or wealth sitting at that table, which may or may not be totally correct. But so our premise was, how do we really increase the amount of women who were sitting at the table of policy to change whatever policy wanted to be changed. And so when we dove into this a little bit, what we understood all of a sudden about women in this industry, this all important industry, was that a lot of women who were in this industry either hadn't been educated or had gone basically to tech school. If you've gone to a culinary school, you've gone to tech school and really didn't understand the business, and therefore didn't want to take the risk that a lot of their male counterparts were taking to have ownership or to have equity in this space. So we started this program called Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership. It's the WELL program. It sits on the James Beard shelf now. And every year we take a cohort of 20 to 25 women and we do an intensive study. We're now partnered with Cornell. An intensive study, now it's 10 weeks. We were doing a 1 week fully focused. It's 10 weeks now. And it really dives in to business, to every aspect of owning business. So these are primarily women who own at least one restaurant, but really gives them the knowledge, the understanding to be able to scale. And what we have found as a result of this, going through times like COVID, at that point we had 80 women who had gone through the program. 96% not only came through COVID still in business, 100% had been shut down and substantially at some point along the way. 96% came out not only surviving, but really thriving on the other side of COVID. The stats around how many new employees, COVID has slowed down some of the growth, but the momentum for opening new restaurants, expanding new employees are all extremely positive. But what goes with those changes and numbers of people impacted is obviously zero tolerance for sexual harassment, but things like night care, things like healthcare, things like access to benefits. And I've sat at the table of industry and other male leaders, and the answer never is, oh, we didn't want to give those things, or we didn't think that our employees should have access to it. The answer was always, it never dawned on us. This is the way we've always done business. And so until somebody shows up empowered with a voice, and this is the other thing I tell young women all the time, you're at the table because you are diverse, not because we want you to look and sound like everybody else at the table. We want your unique ideas. And women think about things sometimes much differently than men. So find your voice and use it. And routinely what we've heard, I just said this, is not, oh, that's so, we blow this off, we don't want to do that. It's that it never dawned on us. So how do we figure out how to execute this? So the impact has been real, and it's going to continue to grow.
Jodie, I commend you on your tremendous work. Phenomenal statistics you just shared. You can't even believe they're true, but we know they are. Now we're into the really fun part of the session where Becky's going to lead us in a roundtable.
Great. Let's continue the great dialogue here, but together, all of us. And we just want you to share, we've touched on it a little bit, but what is your vision, your bold vision for coming out of the pandemic? What do you think the workforce is going to look like? What is that inspiring vision that you have? And then I think let's also talk about then what organizations, executives can do. Like Mary, you've led your executive leadership so much in the technology industry, and Andrew, you as well, and Jodie, you're breaking barriers in the retail real estate industry. So what is your vision? We'll take one at a time, and then what are the one or two most important things that organizations can do to achieve that vision over time? I'll let anybody jump in.
Well, I really, and I'm not just pandering to him, but I thought Andrew's concept of where your talents, your drive, your capabilities are what determines what your opportunities are, that's nirvana. I don't know that it's achievable, but if we can make the asymptote get a little bit closer, I think that would be absolutely fabulous. And I think there's a role for women, and I think that's been done. Women are great, they're capable. We do not have a supply problem, right? On the demand side from a corporations, I think some of the things Andrew was talking about, and I try to do this as well, how do you use your power for good? How do you take power out of the back room and democratize the workings of a company so people get exposed to and can engage in how decisions are made? Are they clear on what the goals are? So what's the process by which you make decisions, by which you set goals, and then how do you track and communicate? And as a leader, and I think probably Andrew and Jodie would say, it feels sometimes like you're tired because you're communicating so much. You actually can't over communicate and really engage people. And this is why we decided this. Here are the facts. And I think that supports sort of diverse leadership styles, because facts are facts, right? So if you're super clear on here's what we care about, here are the goals, here's how we're measuring, here's what worked, here's how we're course correcting, then you can really get the machine going and hopefully tap in to leveraging talents in a phenomenal way. But before I relinquish the talking stick, I just want to say one thing. I think women are great. I think corporations are evolving, but there is a public policy aspect that has to happen. And if you look at just the sheer numbers of women that are leaving the workforce because of the very real pressures of work and family and COVID all sort of crashing down on them, family leave, better healthcare, all of these things are super important, especially to the gender that is often the primary caregiver for families. And I think those issues have to be addressed, and it's unfair to put that burden solely on the individual.
I totally agree. Very inspiring, but I think gives us a roadmap, Mary. So thank you for that. Great.
I'll add a couple of things here. And I think I'd like to comment on something Jodie said and something I saw come up in the Q&A. So this comes from the lens of a manager who is promoted, hired, and created gender diverse teams from the day I had manager responsibilities. Okay, so I've been hiring and promoting women for longer than I want to say. And here's something Jodie said about saying yes. I think this is very important because I've watched this. I've watched this over and over again. And I want to tell you point blank, this is not a masculine or feminine trait. It is a learned behavior. All right. This is a learned, we can argue about all sorts of things, but I'm going to tell you point blank, this is a learned behavior. My wife, God bless her, she'll charge into a room to get something done with 30% of the information she needed to get into that room. Okay. It's a confidence and confidence and clarity kind of thing. So this notion of I got 50% of the information, 60% of the information, and I'm gonna charge in there and say, I can do this. I have a theory and I'm gonna try it. And if I fail, I'm strong enough to get out of it. I've seen again and again, the least talented male in the room will charge forward and do that. And the most talented woman in the room will sit silently. Don't do it. Don't do it. This is a learned behavior, all right? And you can unlearn it and you can ask your manager to bring out the best in you, all right? Because I also saw in the Q&A, do women get fewer P&L positions, or are they offered less P&L positions? Let me share with you some anecdotes from my career of promoting and engaging with female leaders. They don't apply. Why is that? I had to drag, kicking and screaming, one of my female leaders into a P&L role, knowing all the while that you are the right person, you have the right skills, you are better than anybody else. You're not great on stage. That's okay. We can teach that. We can teach you that. And she did not. I had to tell her to apply. All right, and then I gave her the job. But I tell you, some of these things, there's certainly areas where women are not being offered the jobs, but my personal experience has been, I had to ask them to apply. All right, and Mary knows how many women I've put into leadership roles and P&L roles, and I think it's important that people do apply and stand up and put themselves out there. Okay, that's what I've seen over the years. And these are all learned behaviors.
I like the way you frame that. It's not really gender. It's what we grow into. It's that growth mindset, right? Is saying yes and not worrying about that you can't do it, but you're 100% qualified. But lean into that, right? Lean into your best self, right? Have confidence in yourself. Great. Jodie, how about you?
Oh my gosh, I want an organization filled with people who are willing to lean in, male, female. I think diversity, you know, I was thinking about the vision here of what we'd like to see. I'd like to see 20% as a minimum Hispanic. There's so much work that we're doing in those communities. We need to hear those voices. We want to see gender diversity. We want to see ethnic diversity. And but most importantly, and I think this is overused phrase, but I really do want a workforce that's comfortable to bring their whole self to work. And I really think that's important, especially in the work we're doing. And I think especially in the work probably everybody's doing, but people who feel confident to bring their whole self in, because I think once we can get people to that place, I'm finding that that's really when innovation starts to happen. And I know that's an odd thing to say, but people all of a sudden feel comfortable in their own skin. They feel very comfortable asking questions they weren't asking before, throwing out ideas that they weren't comfortable throwing out before because everybody else was taking the conversation over here. And what they could see was the answer sat somewhere over here. And all of a sudden you hear this still small voice say something, and it's like an aha moment. And we went through that here at Eden's, and I don't think we're fully into it, but when the riots happened, back in May of 2020, it really impacted a lot of our places. We have 100 different places in major markets throughout the country, and it impacted physically a lot of our places after a time where our team had worked very emotionally to get a lot of retailers and small retailers back open again. And so our response to the riots and what was happening had to be as much inward as outward. And we sent everybody the reading by Martin Luther King Jr. called The Letter from the Birmingham Jail. And we asked everybody to read it, and we asked them to read it with their families at dinner. And then we divided up into small groups. We'd never tried anything like this. It was a social experiment here of about 10 to 15 people. There were facilitated discussions where everybody walked in uncomfortable, but from the same reading, and they had small, intimate And the reason I tell this is as people became confident in these moments of uncomfortableness together, they all of a sudden kind of grew into their own skin in an unusual work environment. And what we've seen from that, and we've repeated these now because people have asked us to, so we repeat these, but what we've seen is it translates into work and into our business setting. And you're hearing from voices we didn't hear before. And we're faster for it. We're finding solutions much faster. We're getting to answers. And we may be talking about complex engineering decisions for mixed-use buildings, but this person over here all of a sudden is having the confidence to find their voice. And I think that's the kind of workforce that is incredible. It's incredible to hear from.
Well, you all are not only inspiring, but I think you really represent the forward leadership to really evolve in this post-pandemic. And I think, as many say, that good things can happen from disruptive times. But the great leaders all of a sudden start to show up to lead people through this new time, right? And so thank you all so much for your intention, your passion, your vision, and giving all of us today, I think, some practical things that I have noted that all of us can lean into to not only make this a better place, but I think to really have the opportunity for everyone to thrive, because we're all going to be better for it. So in the spirit of the holidays, we thank you, Mary, thank you, Andrew and Jodie, for your time, and we wish you all the best in your holidays and with family and friends, and for all of us that have joined here today. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Zeilstra, who is going to do a wrap-up on this great dialogue today.
Well, thank you, panelists and moderators. What a terrific session. So much learning here, starting with advice for women who aspire into leadership roles. And Mary was great in terms of her advice, finding the right environment and fit for you. And by looking to see how decisions are made within that organization or within that team, and who are the heroes. And the other advice is, just perform really well, but don't stay in your functional role forever. And what we heard a few times is say yes. Even if you're not ready for that future role, take that chance and surround yourself by people who will mentor you and her partners. Pick the right partners so you can grow into that role. And you can't be great at everything. Even if you are great at a few things and mediocre at other things, you can bridge that gap with learning as well as a team. I love Andrew's advice around, we don't really have a pipeline problem if you really allow women to thrive and move up within the organization. And this really requires breaking stereotypes and paradigms and norms, and making sure that you're bringing in all voices to the table, including a more structured decision-making process and ensuring there's diverse recruiting panels. And who doesn't love hearing from CEOs who are using their power and influence beyond just their company and boards, as Jodie is doing by giving women a voice in the culinary industry. And then just on the vision, I just love, ending this session on a more hopeful note. And, with Andrew's vision for gender parity is we have to look forward. We have to make sure that, 10 years out, that everyone can be who they want to be without any stereotypes. And looking forward, we know that the most innovative societies, as well as companies, are those that integrate diverse perspectives. And this does change mindsets. And Mary's vision is that, women are capable. So there's not really a supply problem, and we all need to use our power to democratize a company. And it's not just about individuals or companies, but also public policies, making sure that, women, especially, mothers, have the kind of support, whether it's, you know, paid family leave or healthcare in place so they can really thrive in the workplace. And then lastly, Jodie's vision is that, you know, an organization is where everyone, male or female, lean in, and that there's more diversity, you know, including 20% of Hispanic people in leadership, and that the workforce is comfortable for everyone to bring their whole selves in, because that is truly where innovation happens. Thank you so much. Now back to you, Edie.
Well, did we all stop and just think about these three innovative areas? Mary, Andrew, Jodie, you're really exceptional leaders that are really democratizing your companies with talent, and just can't reiterate enough what we're all thinking about. If your theory of taking the chance and that the pipeline is there and taking the shot, as Jodie said, and really building new companies without all the negativity that's out there, you are private sector leaders that are leading. I think Gwen Young and I would like to remind everybody that our next major call is clearly a global DEI roundtable. It's on December 8th next week. And it's got Rohini Anand's releasing her new book, but Procter & Gamble, L'Oreal, Daimler, and S&P so are all speaking. So it's really going to be extraordinary. We'll keep sending you invitations. We hope that the lessons today that we heard will be picked up by more and more companies, because it is the private sector that is becoming the companies of purpose, the leaders of change. And so we thank the three of you CEOs, and to Robert and Becky and to Jose. We appreciate each other for being bold each day. So on behalf of WBC, with a great deal of gratitude for your leadership. Thank you.